to begin with a keynote speech delivered by Sheikh Khamis Al-Khanjar, leader of the Al-Siyada Alliance of the Federal Republic of Iraq. Your Excellency, we kindly invite you to the stage to deliver your keynote address.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الأستاذ مسرور البرزاني رئيس حكومة كردستان، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السادة الحضور، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسعدني أن أتوجه بالشكر الجزيل للقائمين على هذا المنتدى المهم وعلى الدعوة الكريمة وعلى تنظيم هذا الحدث حول السلام والأمن والاستقرار. إن اجتماعنا اليوم تحت عنوان الفوضى المسيرة شرق أوسط جديد يأتي في لحظة حرجة يمر بها النظام الإقليمي والعالم، فالتقلبات الجيوسياسية وارتفاع منسوب التوترات الإقليمية والتحولات الاقتصادية العميقة تفرض علينا جميعاً مسؤولية العمل المشترك لتخفيف المخاطر وصياغة مقاربات واقعية تعيد لمنطقتنا فرص التنمية والاستقرار. وتتطلب هذه الضرورة مقاربة جديدة تقوم على 3 مبادئ ثابتة لا غنى عنها: سيادة الدول، ووحدة مؤسساتها، واحتكارها لأدوات القوة القهرية. فلا أمن إقليمياً يتحقق إذا بقيت بعض الدول تدار بأدوات خارج إطارها المؤسسي، أو إذا استمر تجاوز حدود الدولة لصالح جماعات مسلحة أو محاور تتعارض مع مصلحة شعوبها. لا يخفى عليكم جميعاً أن الفوضى سواء كانت خلاقة كما أرادتها كوندوليزا رايس لإعادة تشكيل الشرق الأوسط، فوضى عارمة ومتحكم بها بإرادة خارجية لا تعكس تطلعات شعوب المنطقة، ولا يمكن لها تقييد الأمر تعقيداً، لأن بناء الدول والأنظمة السياسية يقوم على عوامل موضوعية وسياقات اجتماعية وثقافية وتاريخية ورمزية واقتصادية لا يمكن تشكيلها عن بعد أو من خلال دول أخرى. منذ سايكس بيكو وترسيم الشرق الأوسط جغرافياً، وفي هذا المنتدى قلت أن سايكس بيكو عندما كتبت لم يؤخذ رأي الشعوب في حدود الدول الموجودة، ولم تراعى معايير القوة أو الموضوع المذهبي أو الطائفي أو الديني أو القومي، وإنما راعت مصالح الدول الإمبريالية الحاكمة في تلك الفترة بين إنجلترا وفرنسا، وأحياناً بين روسيا وإيطاليا. يتكرر الحديث عن إعادة رسم هذه الخارطة، بل وحكمت الكثير من دول دكتاتوريات وأحزاب كانت تتبنى هذه الفكرة، بل وصل الأمر إلى تنظيم داعش الإرهابي نفسه الذي تحدث عن دولة الخلافة تطيح بهذه الخريطة. أما سياسياً فإن طرح فكرة الشرق الأوسط الجديد في سياقها الجديد لا تأتي في سياق التحولات الاجتماعية والثقافية التي تمر بها المنطقة، بل تأتي في سياق كولونيالي آخر وفي سياق محاولة هيمنة أخرى عبر إعادة رسم خارطة الشرق الأوسط سياسياً لمصلحة إسرائيل وليس لمصلحة دول المنطقة وشعوبها، إذ لا يمكن خفض التوترات الإقليمية من دون حل عادل للمشكلة الفلسطينية عبر حل الدولتين ومن إنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي للأراضي السورية واللبنانية ومعالجة القضية الكردية في البلدان التي يتواجدون فيها. ولا يمكن الحديث عن خفض التوترات الإقليمية من دون انبثاق نظام إقليمي متفق عليه يضم الجميع ويحكم الجميع من دون هيمنة أو فرض أمر واقع من دون تدخل خارجي في الشؤون الداخلية. الحضور الكريم، إن للعراق موقعاً فريداً في معادلة الشرق الأوسط، فهو حلقة وصل طبيعية بين المشرق والخليج وبين العالم العربي وجواره الإسلامي الأوسع. وإذا استطاعت الدولة العراقية أن تعيد بناء مؤسساتها على أسس راسخة، فإن العراق سيكون عامل استقرار إقليمي بدل أن يبقى ساحة تتقاطع فوقها الصراعات. إن رؤيتنا الوطنية تنطلق من مبدأ واضح: العراق المستقر لا يكتمل إلا بدولة يتساوى جميع مواطنيها أمام القانون، دولة عادلة تشمل جميع مواطنيها وتساوي بينهم بالحقوق والواجبات. وهنا وبلا شك ولا ريب فإن رؤية المكون السني تندمج داخل هذه الرؤية الوطنية العامة، فهي رؤية تدعم الدولة القوية وتدعم سيادة القانون واحترام الدستور، وتدعو إلى شراكة متوازنة بين كل العراقيين في حاضرهم ومستقبلهم. أيها الأخوة والأخوات، إن أبناء محافظاتنا التي تضررت خلال السنوات الماضية لا يطالبون بمعاملة خاصة، بل يطالبون بدولة عادلة تعيد الأعمار وتنشئ المشاريع التنموية وتمنح الشباب فرصاً حقيقية للمشاركة والإنتاج، وتسمح بعودة النازحين إلى مدنهم وقراهم، خصوصاً في جرف الصخر والعوجة وبقية المناطق دون قيد أو شرط، ومعرفة مصير المغيبين والتوازن في الدولة وإطلاق سراح السجناء الأبرياء. إن استقرار المكونات الاجتماعية في العراق ليس مطلباً فئوياً، بل شرطاً لاستقرار الدولة نفسها، فالدولة التي تتوازن فيها المكونات هي دولة قادرة على القيام بدورها الإقليمي، وهذا ما يليق في العراق، وقادرة على بناء شراكات تحترم سيادتها وتقوي اقتصادها. السيدات والسادة، إن تعميق التعاون الاستراتيجي في الشرق الأوسط يجب أن يتجاوز النظرة الأمنية الضيقة، فالأمن في القرن 21 لا يبنى بالسلاح وحده، بل بالشبكات الاقتصادية وبمشاريع الطاقة المشتركة وبالتعليم وبحركة التجارة وببناء المسارات التي تربط شعوب المنطقة ببعضها البعض. إن منطقتنا تملك إمكانات هائلة، لكن هذه الإمكانات لن تتحول إلى فرص ما لم ننتقل من إدارة النزاعات إلى إدارة التنمية. فالأقاليم التي تتعاون اقتصادياً تصبح أكثر قدرة على تثبيت السلم السياسي والأهلي، وأكثر قدرة على مواجهة التحديات العالمية المشتركة من تغير المناخ إلى الأمن الغذائي. الحضور الكريم، إن الازدهار الاقتصادي ليس هدفاً مثالياً، بل هو الأساس الضروري الذي تقوم عليه كل منظومة استقرار طويلة الأمد. ولنعترف بصراحة، لا يمكن لأي دولة أن تحارب الفقر والبطالة وتعيد بناء الثقة في مؤسساتها دون اقتصاد منتج وعدالة في توزيع الفرص وبيئة استثمارية تحترم القوانين وتمنح المستثمر وضوحاً وأماناً. إننا نحتاج إلى صياغة رؤية اقتصادية مشتركة للشرق الأوسط تقوم على أولاً الربط الإقليمي في الطاقة والنقل، وثانياً حرية انتقال الأفراد والبضائع والاستثمارات دون قيود، وثالثاً الاستفادة من موقع العراق كمحور تجاري وجغرافي، رابعاً دعم المشاريع العابرة للحدود وتحسين بيئة الاستثمار عبر إصلاحات واقعية ومنهجية. السيدات والسادة، ختاماً أقول إن بناء شرق أوسط جديد ليس مشروع دولة واحدة ولا قوة واحدة ولا مكون واحد، إنه مشروع جماعي يتطلب إرادة سياسية وصدقا في التعامل واحتراما لمصالح الدول وإيمانا بأن الإنسان هو محور أي نهضة حقيقية. فالإنسان المستقر المتعلم المنتج هو الضامن الأول لأمن أي دولة. إن طريقنا نحو شرق أوسط أكثر استقراراً يمر عبر دولة قوية عادلة ومجتمع متماسك لا يشعر بالظلم واقتصاد حديث وعلاقات إقليمية قائمة على الاحترام المتبادل والندية والمصالح المشتركة لا التبعية. وأنا واثق أن هذا المنتدى يمكن أن يشكل خطوة واقعية في هذا المسار، وأن يفتح أبواباً جديدة للحوار ورؤية مشتركة تعكس طموحات شعوبنا وآمالها بدلاً من أن تفاقم من مخاوفها ومهدداتها. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Sheikh Khamis Al-Khanjar. Now, our first panel is titled The Middle East Managed Chaos, Assessing the Region's Challenges and Prospects. This session will be chaired by Dr. Dalia Dasa K., Uni of California, Los Angeles, and will feature the following distinguished speakers. His Excellency Hishyar Zebari, former Foreign Minister, Federal Republic of Iraq. Mr. Ferhat Nasrullu, Member of Parliament, Republic of Turkey. Dr. Tariq Youssef, Middle East Council on Global Affairs, Qatar. Dr. Kayhan Barzigar, Institute for Political and International Studies, Iran.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you, MEPS, for having us all here. And it's wonderful to be with these distinguished hosts and this distinguished panel. So we are tasked with looking at both challenges and opportunities and how we manage the chaos. So what we'll do, I think, is we'll start with the chaos. We'll start with the challenges. And what I think would be very interesting is to get the perspective from each place where you're sitting from your vantage point, of what you see as the top threat today. And if you were sitting in MEPS November of last year, because let's face it, this has been a remarkable year. The fall of Bashar al-Assad, 12-day war, bombing of Iran by US and Israel, a strike in Doha, but also positive developments.
shake the Middle East and the balance of power.
And
the incidents that you mentioned, really nobody here in this forum last year predicted that this regional escalation would reach that level. The Middle East generally, I will quote a friend of mine whom I know for many years, has said, the Middle East is a region of the world where instability is infectious, because everything important is connected. Really, this is our part of the world. We have to be realistic, whether it is a new Middle East or the same Middle East, but definitely the trends, the geopolitical trends, are for changing the Middle East as it were. Now here, Iraq, as part of this region, has managed to avoid this war on conflict thanks to the government visions they had to maintain some impartiality. But this is temporary in my view. They cannot sit on the sideline. They have to be clear. I personally think the major challenge to Iraq instability is the regional escalation. I mean, this escalation is not over in my reading. It's not been frozen. I mean, it could erupt anytime. And also another challenge is actually for any country that it respects itself. We hear the intervention of the Prime Minister, which gave a very positive, rosy picture of the country, its economy, its institutions. But there are some serious challenges. One of the key challenges is the non-state actors rule or the militias that every government is promising, pledging to bring them under some control or integrate them. Here, Kurdistan really has tried to be a force of stability, a bridge between Baghdad and the regional neighbors that we have and the international community. So we commend the work of the government for that. Another factor of instability is the fragility of the institution. We were discussing with some Iraqi friends about how important it is to have this institution strengthened and empowered. Is another challenge, in my view, in my personal view. My last point, and I'll give the floor to my friends. I personally think we need, in this region, and Iraq, some certainty about the U.S. forces in this region, the multinational forces. Yes, there are debates, there are some divisions within Iraq about the presence or the legality of these forces in our country. But we know, as a foreign minister, as an international diplomat, I've dealt with this issue with many countries who are hosting foreign troops, but they are sovereign, they are independent, they are there with their consent. And this is what has happened. And I can give you dozens of examples of European, Arab, regional countries. Okay, there is no shame of declaring that or showing friendship to that. I'll stop here and
thank you, Your Excellency. So, Mr. Farhat, we're going to move to you. We heard from His Excellency top concern, and let's try to focus rather than laundry list, really kind of what's keeping you up at night in this current so-called new Middle East, change Middle East, transform Middle East over this last year. Non-state actors was on his list. The regional situation, which is, you know, many things. The question of external forces. How are you seeing it from where you're sitting?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a big pleasure for us to meet today with you. Our region is a crossroad. Actually, we will either slide into deeper fragmentation or manage this chaos, or we will choose a path of stability and prosperity built on cooperation. I believe we still have a window of opportunity to move from manage the chaos to manage connectivity. This means shifting from reacting to crisis to build an infrastructure, institution, and capability that can secure peace and prosperity for our region. Today, I can frame in 3 themes. 1, investing in regional connectivity, especially infrastructure and the new development road. Second, unlocking promising sectors such as renewable energy, digital economy, agriculture and tourism and defense. Third, comforting global fragmentation by deepening regional integration through free trade agreements. How we will connect, increase our connectivity? Let's say, we live in world a high uncertainty area. This from geopolitical tension, supply chain law, and rapid technology distribution. One of the most transformative example in the new development road is a corridor linking from Gulf to Iraq and Turkey to Europe. It's a very important project to increase our relation with the connectivity, not with chaos, but dependency. If we will increase this, we will make a better relations.
Okay, excellent. And we'll return to that, and if other panelists have thoughts about the connectivity, we're already getting to solutions here. But of course, as we know, we need stability for these development plans, but you don't have stability without development. So we have to square that circle. But there also is the question of which connectivity plan. There are many competing plans out there, so I'll be interested in other panelists' thoughts on that. Tariq, why don't we go to you? And maybe if we can start again with the question of what is the biggest challenge? I mean, we've had a very changed year, very many shocks to the system, good and bad. How are you seeing it now, sitting in Doha, but also your broader analytic take?
Thank you, Daisy. Bismillah wa-salatu wa-salam ala Rasulullah. Thanks to the organizers here for inviting me. It's my first opportunity to be in Kurdistan. I've enjoyed my stay and I'm very pleased to be on this panel. Building perhaps on your question and His Excellency's contribution, and also keeping in mind what Sheikh Al-Khanjar had said is where I'm going to come at this, I think. I think at this moment in time, as we look at the last year, the last 2 years, I think if there is one thing that has become perhaps clear to many people in the region, I say this with a lot of confidence, about not just governments in the region, public in the region, is that the biggest threat to instability at this moment, as has been revealed through a course of actions and aggressions and militaristic policies, for the first time perhaps in a long time, is Israel. There's a growing realization and a consensus amongst actors and countries in the region that the biggest threat is really Israel, especially with its current posture, philosophy, ideology, and outreach and approach and behavior towards countries in the region. This is, for the first time, I would argue, is the case in probably at least 15 years. And it raises, I'd say, fundamental questions about regional security and regional order. And it creates, in my humble opinion, the opportunity that Sheikh Khanjar was hinting at, the need for a new security regional order. For the last 10-15 years at least, as most of you have observed, the US has tried through various initiatives to create such an order. The order rested on 3 formulas that I think have become widely understood, observed, and I would say enforced through various administrations in the US. The first component of this order was normalize relations between the Arab world and Israel. So the Abraham Accord, the Negev Summit, the East Med Gas Forum, I could name the initiatives where Israel and the Arabs were meant to come together. The second component of the US efforts was contain Iran, isolate Iran, keep Iran weak threatened, constantly under the prospect of a threat. The third was, and the Abraham Accords, obvious too. The Negev Summit, but the East Med, as much as forum. I could name the initiatives what the U.S. had tried to do. Israel and the Arabs exclude Turkey from the second component of in the U.S. effort, whether it is the Abraham Accords, contain Iran, Summit, or isolate Iran forum, or the IMAC. Turkey was meant to be threatened constantly under all of this. In my prospect has come to a collapse. The third in the last year was, and this of course was obvious to many of us, but not as much discussed. The third component of what the U.S. had tried to do was to exclude Turkey from any regional initiative, whether it is the Abraham Accords or the Negev Summit or the East Med Regional Security Forum or the IMAC. Turkey was meant to be kept diversification of defense partnerships. All of this, in my humble opinion, has come to a collapse in the last year, especially. Creating the opportunity through this perception now that regional matters need to be handled by regional countries. That would include the Arabs, but also Iran and Turkey, in a collective effort to bring about regional security, to reinforce the diversification of defense partnerships, to invest in the autonomy that Sheikh Khanjar emphasized in his speech, and to find solutions for the first time by countries in the region. This is an historic opportunity that I think also gives way and an opening for discussions about regional integration, economic cooperation, in ways that maybe have not been pursued in at least a generation. My bottom line in terms of the shared threat is the U.S. is not going to save us. Europe is busy. It's up to countries in the region, including Turkey and Iran, to look for the kind of regional order, set up settlements that would produce perhaps for the first time an arrangement that would be for the benefit of people in the region.
Can we go to you? Nice, good, provocative opening. Your colleague, of course, we'll return to that question of regional agency. We are seeing a lot more, and as you know, forming at the same time. We just saw last night a UN Security Council resolution in the region have pointed that was a U.S. drafted document that was supported by the entire stability, many of the powerful Arab countries, Iran, given the fact that so it looks like a complex situation. Can we go to you? And I suspect you might have some agreement with your colleague Tariq here on how you see the threat environment. And as you know, people sitting in the U.S., if not in every quarter, and many in the region have pointed to your country as a source of concern and instability, but how are you seeing it in Tehran, given the fact that you faced a pretty unprecedented attack last June, and is the story over or not?
The obvious matter is that this use of force, too much use of force, has been supported by Western technology, and technology is becoming as a matter of disintegration. The apparent thing so I would say that the Western order is acting against its own order. When it goes to Iranian nuclear diplomacy, for instance, in the middle of nuclear apparently bombing campaign against Iran, bombing campaign against IAEA to really attack on Iran. False reports about the obvious matter is that this use of force activity, we see the snapback has been supported by Western technologies. All of these is becoming as a matter of disintegration. So I would say that the Western order is acting against its own order when it goes to Iranian nuclear diplomacy. So I would say the main challenge is too much nuclear diplomacy. We see bombing Western technology that is supporting, for instance, the Israeli Tariq and the false report, about the Iranian nuclear superiority in the air. We see the snapback somehow and European challenge the Iranian. All of these are the Iranian power in a way. So I would say that independent nations a lot of use of force to actually in our region that there are not own independent way. Not much. So I would say the main challenge is create much use of force. the Western technologies that is supporting, for instance, this really Tariq mentioned properly, technological, superiority on the air has somehow challenged the Iranian power in a way. So I would say that we are using a lot of use of force, especially in our region, that there are not much norms and regulations created to control these use of force. We see a great deal of challenge right now that should be dealt in a proper way.
Greater role of the region being able to solve its own problems, because what you just heard, especially this question, I know you have been quite critical. You speak your mind openly, and how critical of Iraqi foreign policy, and where would you focus it? Would it be, kind of not exerting the influence that it could, given the strategic position here in Kurdistan, Iraq, and the role it plays in the region? You heard from Tariq a lot of greater role of the region being able to solve its own problems because, of the changed geopolitical landscape. What would be your prescription for how Iraqi foreign policy could change, and where would you focus it? Would it be Israel-Palestine? Would it be another arena? Where do you think you could make a difference?
Thank you very much. I have here in the audience a dear friend, Professor Ahmed Dawood, only you can do that, who is a great friend and a mentor of diplomacy. Look left, he can correct me, actually, shoulder. For any country to have influence, do what you be on the table. To be counted for. Not to look for others to speak for him or for the country. No, Arab countries, you should. That is destiny. Since Iraq was created, definitely should not deviate from that. It doesn't mean owns that Iraq should not have an excellent relation. Look left, right, shoulder. No, other countries, not at all. That what you believe, you are convinced. For Iraq, it's Iraq destiny. It's part of the Arab fold, of the Arab community, of the Arab countries. That is destiny. Since Iraq was created, definitely it should not deviate from that. It doesn't mean that Iraq should not have an excellent relation with Iran, with the Islamic Republic, or with Turkey, or with other countries. Not at all. That doesn't contradict each other at all. But I think for priorities, it has to go with the mainstream Arab countries, wherever they go. That was really what we followed after 2003. Even there are some cases which we couldn't believe, but in solidarity with the Arab consensus, we have gone. So the issue of recognition of the one-state solution or two-state solution is problematic. Iraq, even before 2003, Saddam Hussein, when he was the hardest Arab nationalist, recognized the Arab peace process. In 2002 in Beirut conference. We, after 2003, in successive Arab summit and Arab meeting, again, we embraced that Arab solution or Palestinian solution. Now, after so many years, you say, no, I'm not part of that. It really doesn't make any sense.
So you would support the
that
resolution that passed yesterday?
I think that is the consensus of the Palestinians themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? So we cannot be more Palestinians than the Palestinians. On many other issues, really, you have to be credible in dealing with international diplomacy, with other countries, with superpowers, with the American, with the European. Really, you have to be credible in many ways. To honor your commitments, to honor the agreements you have, the memorandum of understanding you have. What I hear, the feedback, really people have their own doubts whether these guys are serious or not.
Yeah.
That's a question. In fact, for the Iraqi government or the next Iraqi government, they have to address in order to gain more credibility in their foreign policy and in their position in dealing with the rest of the world.
Thank you for that. So sticking on this issue, because this is live news, the Security Council they don't pass very much these days, but the Russians and Chinese abstained, and your government supported this resolution to move forward with the next stage of the ceasefire. What role do you see Turkey? You were very active in pushing for the ceasefire. What role do you see your country playing moving forward? And what is your thoughts on how sustainable, because in all of our discussions here at MEPS, a big theme that's come up is it's one thing to say you have peace, it's another to actually implement the peace and make sure it's sustainable. And I think there's a lot of question marks about whether what we're seeing is truly sustainable and will really lead to a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. How are you seeing that from Ankara?
Actually, in our country, our position to ceasefire for every conflict between any countries. Let's say the problem between Russia and Ukraine, we are trying to solve. The peace process is ongoing on Turkey in Istanbul. We're trying to connect between both countries to solve the problems. And the same problem for the conflict between Israel and Palestine also. We believe if these countries all around the Middle East, let's say, if there is a peace process, it is advantage for everybody. If there is a peace process, the development of tourism, development of relation with energy, development on the, let's say, agriculture, food, it will affect everything. For that reason, our president, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he's all the time, his aim to solve the problem in Middle East, and he's trying to be peace process on that process. And we believe, firstly, we have to solve the problem in Turkey. Now, in Turkey also, we start to make a peace process. It's very important because of the last 40 years. Actually, we are spending around $2 billion for the, let's say, internal problems. Now, we are trying to improve that. And if we spend that money for the development of the country, I believe we will be in other stage, let's say.
So you're optimistic on the peace process moving forward?
Yes, we are optimistic.
Can I just ask Your Excellency, and then we'll move to the other panelists, what your view, how you think Kurdistan and Iraq at large is looking at what's happening in Turkey vis-a-vis the how are you viewing?
This was really the most positive development in Turkey that has come, this peace process. And the good thing about it, it's coming from the grassroots. It's not a governmental position or a party position. I think it's coming from the grassroots, from the nationalists to the leftists to the democratic forces. Everybody is supporting that. And also we have some indication. The last Nowruz celebration in Diyarbakir, I think, was indicative of how much people are attached. And they have vindicated our position all along, which President Barzani has advocated, that really you cannot resolve the Kurdish issue through armed struggle only. That is one of the means. There are days when you are forced, but really, at the end of the day, we have to embrace dialogue and also an understanding and recognition. So we here in Kurdistan wholeheartedly support the peace process, and practically and operationally, I think we have been supportive of President Erdogan's initiative, or the Turkish peace initiative, which is supported. Yes, there are some complaints, it's been delays or lack of progress, but the process is moving, and we have been supportive of that. The same position we have vis-a-vis in Syria, in northeast Syria, Rojava. We have been supportive, actually, of the SDF and the Kurdish parties trying to be integrated with the new Syrian regime, the new pluralistic, democratic Syrian regime. So to answer your question, yes, we are very happy about this progress, this development, and I think it's in the benefit of the entire region. We've suffered here in Iraqi Kurdistan because of the PKK activities from Kurdistan or across the border. We have hundreds of villages still are vacated because we cannot rebuild or rehabilitate them because of the military attacks and so on. So there is benefit to everybody in this regard.
Excellent. So we're getting to manage chaos. This is sounding like a very rosy panel. So Tariq, don't spoil this for us. But I want to get back, and His Excellency just mentioned Syria, and you were talking about greater regional agency. You're seeing a lot of Arab cooperation with Turkey. It's very interesting, whether it comes to Syria, whether it comes to Gaza. But the question of Israel is, as being, and this is, you're hearing this more and more, yet at the same time, you're seeing many states in the region, especially in the Gulf, still very much turning toward Washington, and Washington is still very much supporting Israeli objectives, and in fact, very much doubling down on the Abraham Accord gambit, and it probably won't happen with the Saudis at the moment, but to be continued. But nobody's broken relations off with Israel. So despite this dramatic set of events, in terms of the current Abraham Accord countries, Mohammed bin Salman is in Washington today, Washington time, or will be, looking for a similar deal that the Qataris got, some F-35s. Relations seem to be very strong. So how do you put those pieces together? What kind of Middle East are we seeing when we still have this very large U.S. role, but yet greater regional agency, more concern with Israel, and continued rapprochement with Iran?
Thank you, David. Actually, that's a great question and an opportunity maybe to clarify more what one was trying to say earlier. There's no doubt that in the short term, in the very short term, the U.S. is indispensable. The U.S. is relevant. The U.S. is the most influential actor in the region. It will help with the ceasefire. It will conduct transactions with various countries in the region, including with Mohammed bin Salman, on weapons, on security guarantees, on a host of other economic initiatives. But the notion that the U.S. is in the long term your security guarantor, or U.S. credibility as a guarantee for a regional order, I think has long been shattered, especially in the last couple of years. And you hear this everywhere. I've been quoted as saying recently, in the case of the strikes by Israel on Qatar, which was a major political shock for people in the Gulf, states, observers, and the publics. I said publicly, there are $500 billion in a commitment to the U.S., investment commitments, business commitments that the Qataris had just made prior to the strike during Trump's visit to the Gulf. Cannot buy you a phone call to warn you about an incoming strike. How much faith can you still have in the so-called U.S. security umbrella? So in the short term, the U.S. is indispensable. We need the U.S. We need for the ceasefire and everything. But increasingly, the realization that regional countries have to show agency, engage in collective efforts to resolve problems, and you're seeing it, as you rightly pointed out. Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt. Gulf countries are diversifying with Asian countries. Elsewhere, countries in the region are also exploring how to protect, invest in autonomy, how to ensure that, in fact, legitimate, credible security needs are being addressed, are going to be increasingly responded to and addressed by countries other than the U.S. As for the Abraham Accords, I think they've become a huge liability for the countries that signed onto them. Yes, they seem to be a promising initiative a few years ago, but have you seen any signatory to the Abraham Accord come out in the middle of the genocide that's taking place in Gaza and say, we're still committed, we're proud of that policy, we think this was a long-term good bet for us. I don't think so. If anything, a lot of countries have been slowly, maybe covertly downgrading that relationship. This is not to say that Israel is not going to be a part of a regional order promoting security and prosperity. It can. Hopefully it will become. But it's certainly not the current Israeli regime. Not the ideology, not the tactics, not the policies, and not the approach to countries in the region. And so thinking short-term, managing the chaos, but long-term promoting what Sheikh Khanjar, I think, was hinting at, collective effort, leadership shown by countries in the region to promote joint security and joint prosperity. And I would fall back again on my bet, my belief, that that order has to include Iran and it has to include Turkey in a collective effort for everyone.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I think it is an important reminder that, you know, to have real peace, you have to make peace with your actual enemies who you're fighting. And
here I want to comment one thing on Tariq's statement. Really, you mentioned that the Abraham Accords have become a liability, while the attitude now is to broaden the Abraham Accord to include Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, and others. So at the end of the day, everybody needs this indispensable power, you see, to intervene. Even if they are running away from the Middle East will follow them, you see, to come back.
I recognize that.
Well, and I think that's an important point to underscore, Your Excellency. It's not either or. I think there's too much of this debate. The U.S. is in, it's out, it's a complex picture. But Ken, speaking of making peace with your enemies, you know, there's a lot in terms of how Iran is navigating the new threat environment. Of course, in many quarters, there's a sense that Iran is on the back foot. You're hearing American policymakers constantly talking about a new realignment, feeling very emboldened. How are you reacting to this? And we didn't, you know, Tariq talked about the U.S. role and some, you know, hedging with Asian powers, especially China. Is China-Russia alignment your way out of this, of survival, or are we going to be surprised at MEPS next year that there'll be some renewed U.S.-Iran dialogue? President Trump has suggested he's interested. He thinks the Iranians want to come back to the table, that they're pressured to come back to the table. Is this in the cards? Do you think this is possible, or do you see a different future?
Actually, I think that, you know, the way they dealt with Iran was very dissatisfactory, not only by Iranian government, rather by Iranian nation. And one of the main lessons to Iranian after the 12-day war was that for the first time, the Iranian realized that they need this certainty to go towards China and Russia. And I think at the same time, because before that, the Iranians were confused going to the east or the west, when they realized that the Western countries are not going to give Iran investment, technology, whatever, then they realized that they need to go to China, not liking China or Russia, but this is something determining Iranian to go in that direction. And at the same time, I think on the Chinese and the Russian part, they realized that the Western countries are weakening Iran in their southern for Russia and their western border with China. So they need to somehow support Iran. So we see a new equation in a way that there is a kind of certainty in strengthening relations between Iran, China, and Russia. And I think that that is the logic, the strong logic that the Asian development needs to be somehow evolved in a non-Western way, as we see in the region after the U.S. Support of Israel, and Israel doing everything everywhere in the region, that we see no balance of power rather than the region one side, the Israeli on the other side. We see a great deal of self-reliance by the regional state to count on their own and diversifying their relations with not China and Russia. I would say that regional power and rising power like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, India, China, Russia, these countries are perceived in a non-Western world. and they need to cooperate in a way. And I think another point is that the region needs, as it was mentioned by the participant, the region needs to solve its issues before going to the West, because this has been apparent after the Israeli attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities and the US bombing campaign against Iran to stop Iran, firing missiles to Israel. That was the reason that Iran has accepted ceasefire because of the US bombing. We have this growing dissatisfaction inside Iran that we should not have accepted the ceasefire. We should have continued, because the Israelis do not understand the way that they want to deal with the other nations. So I think we are on the verge of a very turning point time in the region, and there has been an opportunity created in the region to cooperate with each other, I think, between Iran and countries in the region, Turkey, Iran, and other Arab countries. There is this opportunity to work together, because this is something that the region is realizing. The Western way of attituding towards the region sometimes goes to its factory default use of force, and all issues of diplomacy, human rights, international law, all of them goes in the context of double standard. You see a great deal of different attitude by the West. So this is the real challenge we are facing right now.
Well, it's interesting, because I don't know if the audience is hearing this, but you're hearing very different versions of what the regional order should be, how to seize on opportunities that are clearly there. I mean, it is a very interesting moment where there's wide consensus that you need human security, you need development, you need to deal with displacement, deal with your people. That's what prosperity, this region in Kurdistan is a good example of that. At the same time, there's very different versions of how to structure the regional relationships to get there, whether it's corridors, whether it's political alignments with external powers. So I think it's something we need to think about. And Kayhan, what you're suggesting and what I'm hearing is that the story is not over. If there are quarters in Iran suggesting that they should not have accepted the ceasefire, we may not be done with this conflict. So before we just turn it to the audience for a very brief round of questions, if we have some, and hopefully this very distinguished group provokes some, can we just go through with a very lightning round prediction? If you're sitting in MEPS November 2026, are we back to war in Gaza? Are we back to war between Israel and Iran? Given this affects all of you, all of us, those kinds of conflicts make everything else so much more difficult. How do you read things? Where do you see things going 1 year from now? We'll end very quickly. Each of you, very quick, what you predict, yes or no conflict.
I said in my intervention, one of the biggest challenges facing Iraq is this regional escalation, and this is what I meant. Really, I mean, this conflict could erupt again, in my vision, because it's not settled, it's not resolved.
Okay, I don't mean to end on a pessimistic note. Maybe someone here will say we'll be here and have managed the chaos in a year. So thank you, Your Excellency. Yeah.
Actually, it is not a matter of Iran. It's a global
security
is rising. Because when you're visiting Eastern European countries, they are afraid attack of Russia. And they are investing, or their expenditure for, let's say, annual defense expenditure, it's reached to $6 trillion. It's a huge amount of money that they are spending for defense.
Yes.
It's a global problem, I believe.
But what would be your prediction about whether we can expect resumed conflict in Gaza or vis-a-vis U.S., Iran, Israel, Iran in a year at MEPS November 26th?
Yes, I believe if the country defense system, they are invest on that area, the others afraid to attack them, then it can be stabilized.
So you think deterrence is going to hold?
They can bomb through the airplane, and it is. Let's say it must be a causation.
Yes.
Maybe there is some pact. There is a new
I think it's a great point that, you know, these things are not inevitable, that there are factors that would weigh against this resumption. Tariq?
I would say let's hope Trump remains committed to supporting the ceasefire and restraining Israel. If not for that, and he could change his mind at any moment, I would say there are expectations all around the region that a relapse of the conflict between Iran and Israel could happen. There'll be an escalation in Lebanon, and Israel's aggressive policies towards Syria could further escalate, not to mention some of the other festering problems. So I think we are living in a moment of great uncertainty, and hence the need for efforts by countries and actors in the region to perhaps try to preempt and contain and work towards cementing some of the stability that has been at least momentarily achieved.
Very good. It gives us a motivation to keep at it, to keep peace going.
Actually, escalation can happen in every moment, but I tell you something, when the Israeli, attacked Iran, the government of Iran never expected this much solidarity from the Iranian people. The Iranian became very angry. They cannot even, digest the American bombing of Iran. So there is this angerness amongst the Iranian that could pave the way for a devastating attack by Iran to Israel. The Iranian would not attack Israel. If the Israeli attacked, the result of that attack would be the harsh Iranian response. So I would say that, the Israeli right now might think that they did this surprise attack. They have had some success in the day 1 and 2, but the Iranian, we should remember that the Iranian could stop the Israeli war machine after 50 years. The Iranian fought well, I think, against 2 technological power. That was something that we should take into consideration. But this time, the Iranians are ready to re-attack in a very devastating way. So I think that would, stop the Israeli to re-attack Iran.
Okay, so assurance of deterrence. Okay, so let's open it up. Thank you all, very interesting conversation. I think we have a mixed bag. It shows we have a lot of work to do to sustain the peace and the opportunities that can be capitalized on. So I saw a couple of hands, I think, in the front. We'll just take a few questions. We'll keep the questions short. Introduce yourselves, short questions. Say who you're directing it to, if you're directing it to everyone, because the questions are between us and lunch, I think, according to the organizers. So right here in the front, yes, please. Oh, we need mics, yes?
Thank you very much. Loyal Khatib, academic and former minister. My quick comment is about the chaos in the Middle East, that we cannot talk about, or it's very challenging to talk about the chaos in the Middle East in isolation with the economic chaos worldwide. We're witnessing a world that is shifting completely different from the financial system of the Bretton Woods Agreement days to a completely new system is evolving and yet to be created. This is as a result of the growing global debts that's skyrocketing, $380 trillion US, 12% of which are US debts. And the whole world, when they're talking about the Middle East and remapping and reshaping a new Middle East, talking about a region that is unfortunately taking the whole world at ransom, while it holds over 45% of a rewarding commercial energy resources. And the only region that could help the world. When President Trump commented at Sharm el-Sheikh, he said, Iraq holds lots of oil and they don't know what to deal with. Many people in this country ridicule that comment. He wasn't referring to the 4.5 million barrels that Iraq producing or the 150 billion barrels that Iraq holds. He was referring to the potential of 330 billion barrels that Iraq holds, with a potential of 10 million barrels that could produce and turn itself into a swing producer The world needs another swing producer than Saudi Arabia. By the reports of OPEC, by 2045, the world needs to add 25% of what the world producing oil today. That's 125 million barrels a day. That's 2.5 Saudi Arabias. And the only country that could play as a candidate to produce a significant amount is Iraq. Again, we really need some sort of kind of cooperation, more stability in the region to provide enough energy security that sustains global security, eventually contribute to the political security globally and the region.
Thank you. Such an important point. Thank you so much, Minister. The role of economic, my economist friends will be very happy you raised this, but again, emphasizing how important the economic opportunities are if you get the stability. Your Excellency, did you want to respond to that at all?
I agree with Dr. Luay Khatib. He's an expert. He's the former Minister of Oil in Iraq, so he knows what he is talking about. I think the key point he highlighted is political stability in the region is in the best interest of development, of investment, of trade, and this is what is lacking, and that's why we're discussing chaos in the Middle East.
Yes. Absolutely. Do we have any, I see hands in the back, we'll take just a couple more, but do we have any students whose hands are up? Because I can't see. If it's a student, wave your hand, because you'll get priority. Students? No? Okay. Oh, okay, right back here. Thank you. We are at a university, and you have such a talented cohort of young people here in Kurdistan, so let's hear from a student. Yes, speak up. I think a mic may be coming to you, but go ahead. Yeah. Oh, I said student. Okay. Okay. All right. So go ahead with your question. Introduce yourself, please, and go ahead.
Here you go.
Thanks so much. So as a woman, I wanted to ask you a question because all the panelists were men discussing the issue chaos and so peacemaking in the Middle East and the world without women. And thank you, Dr. Dalia, for hosting such important conversations. So my question to you all about chaos in the Middle East. What is your policy? What is your agenda for women involvement in the process? Because as you know, Kurdish women in Western Kurdistan, Rojava, being part of the process of Syrian democratic peace process, and we see how successful they are. So I would like you to comment very briefly, what is your intake on role model, Kurdish model, Kurdish women's implementation in chaos and peace process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And since there was a previous point in the conversation about economic development, all the data shows that without integrating youth and especially women in the workforce, you're going to have a big challenge. So anybody have any thoughts on the role of women in these peace process, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Turkey, whether it's this region, in general development, Tariq or Mr. Farhad?
Just a remark.
Yes.
Last week, we are in Germany, Berlin, and we have a meeting with Yazidi people. They are divided, and because of the region also, they are, especially in Turkey, they have some problems, and we are trying to solve the problems. And one of the women, they said in Turkish, I don't know how I spell in English, but they said, bizim memlekette kadınlar erken uyanır, güneşten önce uyanır. Çünkü güneşi doğuranlar bizim kadınlarımızdır. I don't know how I can spell
it. It sounds good, but I don't know.
But they said, the woman, it is early wake up. Before sun rising, they are wake up because they are doğurmak, şeye doğurma.
We're hard workers.
Well, I cannot, but they said the rising of the sun, it is because of the woman.
Okay. Very good.
It is very important that in this region, the woman is very important for us. And in the peace process also, I believe the woman role is very important.
Excellent.
It must be in the politics, or they must be in cultural, they must be in the production, industry, in everywhere.
Yes, of course there's a gap between recognizing the importance of women and implementing policies that empower women. Tariq, do you have any data from Middle East Council that you want to share on that?
I guess what I wanted to say, it's hard to disagree with the thrust of the question. I think we've been engaged in this debate, discussion for over a quarter century now. There's wide recognition of the importance of integrating women in society, in the economy, in politics. And we have a lot of examples and a lot of experience to fall back on. I think what we have failed to do is to promote the kind of knowledge sharing and good practices that some countries or some societies have come up with across the region. This is going to be more challenging in the coming period because increasingly it's going to be, again, actors in the region owning this agenda. This agenda cannot be seen to be coming from the outside. It has to be couched, has to be anchored, and it has to be presented in different ways. I don't see any resistance in the way that perhaps was the case a quarter of a century ago to promoting gender equality, the empowerment of women. But maybe if I have an opportunity now to just add my 2 cents to the question that was asked previously. I think increasingly, as you said, Dr. Luay, it's not just the international political order that's fragmenting, it's the international economic order that's fragmenting also. So globalization is in retreat, trade wars are emerging, countries are becoming more protectionist, and national security considerations are seeping into everything. These trends are going to reinforce the need for regional integration because regionalism becomes the answer and the response by countries, and we're seeing it around the world. Asia is looking after Asia. Africa is looking after Africa. Latin America is going to look after Latin America increasingly. This is precisely another motivation, I would argue, for why regional cooperation, regional projects, both political and economic, will end up reinforcing one another. Case in point, as much as I like the IMAC and the promise of the IMAC, I am much more excited about the Middle East Development Project, for example, the corridor that links up Iraq and Qatar and the UAE with Turkey. That's organically placed, it makes economic sense, it doesn't need geopolitical underpinnings, and it helps with regional security and regional prosperity.
Okay, we ran out of time. I see there's more questions, but perhaps over the lunch you can ask the others. I'm hearing a lot of actually optimism, region, instead of one country first, region first. So maybe we need a new motto that comes from this panel.